Hey coaches, and welcome back to another mini masterclass. Great to have you with us as always. What we're going to be covering today is another principle of play. Today we're going to be covering advantage. All right, advantage is a big piece of basketball. We're going to be working on how do we define it and how do we teach advantage in basketball. Now, the game of basketball revolves around advantage, right? So it's a big part of the game. So it's really important that players can understand, or we can help players understand and teach players what types of advantages there are, define these advantages, and then how do we exploit them both offensively and defensively. Now, advantage is described from big to neutral, and there's a continuum here. Obviously, you see big advantage, small advantage, and neutral. And what we're going to do now is we're just going to talk about defining advantage. All right, defining advantage is a big piece to the puzzle. Now, if you look at the very end, big advantage. What is a big advantage in basketball? Well, a big advantage in basketball, we're talking about offense, right? We're talking about offensive advantage. So if there's a big advantage that exists, the defense is in scramble, the offense is in what we call dominoes. As you can see, dominoes there. We can talk about that a little bit later. The offense is in domino situations. And then from there, offense is just trying to execute to find the best shot possible. Now, we slide over. A small advantage. A small advantage is when the defense is matched up, but there's a slight advantage that exists. Now, that can exist in a various different ways, but there's a slight advantage that exists. And usually, the small advantages are happening with some type of momentum base to them. So there's some type of flow, there's some type of momentum that's happening. And then what you want to do with that momentum, what you want to do with that small advantage is you want to take that small advantage and then snowball it, build on it into a big advantage. So small advantages exist within the game throughout every position. We want to snowball small advantages to get to big. Now, all the way over here on the right, we have neutral. Now, neutral, defense is all matched up. There are no current advantages that exist for the offense. Offense is in neutral. So if you've ever seen, you ever driven a car, you know what I mean. Neutral, you're not going anywhere. So if offense is neutral, well, then it's actually the defensive advantage, right? If offense doesn't have advantage, they're just stalled, there's nothing going on, well, then that's a defensive advantage. So big and small advantages are advantages for the offense. And then anything close to neutral or neutral itself is an advantage for the defense. Talked about dominoes when it came to the big advantage. And what do we mean by this? Well, dominoes was actually, the term dominoes actually came from this man down here, Ross McMains. He is a current Tall Black assistant, a New Zealand-based coach that is now coaching in the NBA system. So he's a famous coach from New Zealand, and he coined the phrase dominoes. He came up with this term. Now, the real definition of what dominoes is right here in this quote. The moment an advantage exists, right? So the moment an advantage is triggered, the offense then must drive, kick, space, and move the ball until a great shot appears. So if you have a look down here, Michael Jordan has beaten his defender. The moment this happens, the moment he has beaten his defender, the first domino has fallen. It hits the other dominoes. Now, once we get into dominoes, once the first one's tipped, once the first one is triggered, then the role of the offense is then trying to drive and kick and then move into space. And we want the dominoes to stop falling once we've found the best shot possible. Now, this might mean that we drive and kick and drive and kick, and then we pass and someone's wide open for a silver medal shot and we shoot that. We'll tie this in when we talk about shot selection. But this could also mean that I might drive, kick, pass, and then someone gets a gold medal shot, which is a layup. Now, dominoes, again, first domino tips, we want to keep them falling until we find the great shot. And how do we do this? We follow the rules of dominoes. Now, there's 3 rules to dominoes. Number 1, the ball can't stop. If we tip the domino, Michael Jordan's driving, and he passes it to me, but then when I catch the ball, I hold it, well, then the defense is just going to recover, match up, and then we're probably going to end up back in neutral. We don't want that to happen. So The first rule is that the ball must keep moving. The ball can't stop. We want to build this advantage to find the good shots. Now, second rule, whenever we drive, okay, whenever we move into space, right? So this is in terms we're talking about getting to the basket. Whenever I drive to the basket, if I pass the ball, I need to go from in space to out to space, right? We can't have everyone cutting to the basket. We talked about this in spacing, but we can't have everyone cut to the basket because that's not going to be good for our offense, because we want to try to exploit the best shots possible, which are at the rim. And we can't do that if everyone's cutting to the basket. So if I cut or if I drive, if I don't have a good shot, once the ball's moved out, I got to respace. So respacing is a crucial part to help keep dominoes falling. And the last rule is, how do we stretch the defense? We don't want one to be able to guard two. What that means is, if I'm on defense and two players are really, really close together, well, then me on defense, I can cover space and be able to guard two players at the same time. When we get into domino situations, there's going to be advantages out there for the offense, because most likely, just like this picture here, there's going to be one less player in rotation because I've just beaten someone. So as we're moving around, the offense needs to space in a way that makes it hard for people to guard two players at once. So how do we exploit this? Well, we might exploit it with a cut. We could exploit it by lifting and moving around the ball, push and pull, all those type of things. So again, what is dominoes? It's the moment the advantage is triggered. Offense has got the defense in scramble mode. So we need to use these three rules: ball don't stop, into space, out to space, and one can't guard two, to ultimately help us find the best shot possible. There's various types of advantages. The main four advantages that exist in the game: numbers advantage, positional advantage, spatial advantage, and individual advantage. And we're going to go over these right now and kind of talk about the different types. Now, number one here, numbers advantage. Normally this exists most in transition. This is one of the easiest ways to get a numbers advantage. So right here, LeBron James is throwing an outlet pass to someone running. If we're running down the floor and we're really fast on offense, there might be 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, however you want to split it. But if we run on offense, we can generate a numbers advantage and be able to exploit it by trying to get really, really good shots. So that's an example of a numbers advantage. Transition offense is where they happen mostly. Now, another type of advantage when it comes to numbers is two players on the ball. Now, when two players guard one player, right, in this picture here, we're getting trapped. This could be both an offense and defensive advantage. It could be a defensive advantage because if we pressure the ball handler without fouling, then they might turn it over, right? But at the same time, there's an offensive advantage that exists. If we're being pressured and we move the ball quickly, we're going to end up having a numbers advantage, because once this ball moves out of her hands, there will be a 4 versus 3 situation. So numbers advantage is one of the type of advantages that exists. Now, positional advantage, right? Again, we can describe this both offensively and defensively. We already talked about Michael Jordan over here, but this is one of the biggest advantages that can exist 1v1 in a positional sense. He's just driven the basketball and now he's shoulder to chest or shoulder to hip. He's beating his player. So that's an example of a positional advantage. He's driving the basketball. The player is on his side. They're not going to recover. So there is a big advantage in this situation. Big advantage exists. Now, on the other hand, we have Kawhi Leonard guarding LeBron James. Now, right now, there's no advantage that exists, because right now they're chest to chest. Chest in front on defense is legal guarding position. So Kawhi has legal guarding position on LeBron James. So it is neutral. So this is an example of a neutral advantage for the defense, right? If LeBron James was to rip it real quick, he might end up like MJ over here. But at this time, there's no advantage that exists. So We have outer position over here, shoulder to chest, and we have chest to chest position over here. So now we're in neutral. The next two types of advantages, spatial and individual. Now, spatial advantages. Now, usually these spatial advantages can kind of come in small and subtle ways. Now, for instance, there's a picture here of Giannis, right? So imagine Giannis in a transition situation. For those who watch NBA, or for those who haven't, think of a guy that's like 7 foot, that can handle the ball like a guard, running straight at you with the basketball. Well, if you're running back on defense, jogging back, and you're trying to contain this is going to be pretty hard to stop. Now, the number one reason it's going to be hard to stop, outside of size, speed, athleticism, skill, there's a spatial advantage. If I'm here and you're here, this is Giannis, you're trying to defend him, and he's coming at you, he has space for speed to generate a quick move and beat you. So spatial advantages in downhill situations, again, usually happen in transition. They can exist in the half court. This is a really small advantage, however, that can be snowballed into a big advantage. Now, regardless of your skill level, if you're coming down at someone like this with speed, there's still advantages that exist, because a quick movement here or there, I could get past someone. Now, another example of a spatial advantage, right here, we got some girls playing defense. Now, right now, the person with the ball sees a lot of bodies in front of them. So this right here, there's no advantage that really exists for the offense at the moment, because defense has done a good job. This could be transition, or this could be in the half court, where they're loading up behind the ball and they're supporting. They're taking away all the space for the offense. So the offensive player would have to move the ball to get the ball into space to then look at trying to build advantages. Now, at the moment, this is an advantage for offense, because for defense, however, because there's nothing that exists. But because the defense has shrunken the floor, if you move the ball, there could quickly be an advantage that you can exploit. So those are just some examples of spatial advantage. We have Big Shaq over here and a small guard beside him. Now, we have two major types of advantages here. We have what we call a mouse and what we have a turtle. However you want to call it, big versus small, fast versus slow. Those are some individual advantages that might exist. So if Shaquille O'Neal was close to the basket and he had this player on defense, well, what do we think is going to happen? Well, the bigger player is probably going to be able to score. If you flip the situation, though, if the guard had the ball and Shaq was trying to defend him on the perimeter, well, then the guard would probably have a big advantage. You'd probably have to look over here by the girls on defense. You'd probably have to shrink the floor to help Shaq, just like you might have to double Shaq if he's got a smaller player on it. So these are two advantages that might exist. Now, for small players, it's not a weakness. It's just a reality. The reality is that this player is small and this player is big. This player is fast and this player is a little bit slow. So it's a reality. It's not a weakness. You just have to learn to kind of deal with the current reality that you might be in. Now, over here, in this instance, we have Jrue Holiday over here, which is probably one of the NBA's premier defenders. Now, he's going to have a big advantage on players that he guards on the perimeter for the most part. Obviously, NBA is a little bit different. These are the most skilled players in the world. But let's say, for instance, Jrue Holiday was guarding someone that couldn't really dribble the ball. Well, if Jrue Holiday's guarding someone that can't dribble, well, there's going to be a big advantage, or an advantage of some sorts, available to the defense, because he can pressure the ball a little bit more. And as he's pressuring the ball, you could fan out and defend your player a little bit more closely and give this player no options, which would force them to play one-on-one with one of the better defenders. Now, on the flip side, if this player was super skilled, and let's say it wasn't Jrue Holiday, let's say it was a road cone, all right, that's someone that couldn't really play defense, well, then it flips again. But again, those are just some examples of different types of advantages. Again, we have numbers advantage, positional advantage, spatial advantage, and individual advantage. Again, like most principles of play, or all our principles of play, the first thing we need to make sure we do is help build understanding. So it's really important we start to define and explain to players what big, small, and neutral advantages are, and then what do they look like. So, for example, we could have numbers advantage, an offensive transition, which could lead to big advantages. We could have shoulder to chest advantages that lead to big advantages, domino situations. And then again, we have defensive advantages. Again, the double team here, that could cause offense to turn the ball over. That could be an advantage for the defense. And then over here, a neutral situation that could be turned into an advantage by ball movement or anything else, but currently is a defensive advantage. So the first thing we need to do is introduce big, small, neutral as a concept and as a way to define advantages. And then from there, we need to help put them in these advantages. So part of our toolkit here is, for example, we could put players in transition situations where they have numbers advantage. So we could play some type of game that could have them have some numbers, hot potato, touch the line, whatever it is. We could give offense numbers, and then they would have to figure out where to move the ball to find the biggest advantage to then, execute and find a good shot. Again, we can put players in big advantage situations. So, for example, we could start a 4-on-4 game with a shoulder to chest advantage, like there's happening over here with MJ, and then offense have to then move the ball, use their dominoes rules to then find the best shot. At the same time, we are working on our defense. This is two-way teaching. So even though offense has advantage, can we try to neutralize the situation? Can we take this big advantage, scramble around on defense, and can we get back to neutral? That would be the goal for the defense. Now, again, we can put players in neutral situations. So we could play a one-on-one situation like there is here, and we can say, hey, look, we're starting one-on-one, offense is neutral. It's a defensive advantage. You are chest to chest. You have 5 seconds from your first dribble. You are trying to score at the basket, trying to score gold medals. All right, in our defense, you're trying to maintain chest in front. Okay, so those are just some examples of how we teach it. But again, the main source of teaching it is, number one, define them to the players, big, small, neutral, and then put them in situations. And then as you put them into situations, describe the situation there. Right now, for example, it could be a small advantage. You could have transition situation happening where everyone's kind of matched up, but they might have a spatial advantage. There might be space for speed to go and attack and then tip the first domino to then gain a big advantage, to snowball that advantage from small to big. But in every position, these advantages exist throughout the continuum. It's very important to help players identify and teach players what these advantages are, and then use it as a platform to then, again, teach the game, teach advantage. Because once players understand where their advantages are and they're attuned to the advantages that are happening on the court, this is when they really start to think the game better. How do I find a big advantage? If I have a small advantage, how do I snowball it? And then on the defensive end, how do we stay neutral as much as possible? Because if we're neutral on defense, this is our advantage. How do we get to it? Define advantage, put them in advantage situations, and then allow them to explore these types of advantages and help coach them on how to exploit them. That's the main thing. Again, thank you for joining us. I can't wait to hear from you to discuss this a little bit further. Until then, see you later.